Welcome back everyone to a video, and today we're talking about Bryce Young and the serious implications that this season has on not only the Panthers but his own career for, as long as he's in the NFL. Before we get into it, we are, I think, 11 subscribers away from 700, so I might be a little bit more than that now or a little less, I don't know, but it's right around there. So if you could take a second, hit the subscribe button, I would really appreciate that. We're on the road to 1,000 subscribers, closing in on 700. So if you like NFL content, I do a lot of that, whether it's videos like this, team rankings, player rankings, all that kind of stuff, draft content whenever that time of the year is around, whatever it may be, I am usually doing videos on it. So if you like the NFL, hit the subscribe button. It's free. I would really appreciate that. Starting out though, again, I am a believer in Bryce Young, but last year was very, very bad. And I'm going to talk about some of the reasons why, the offensive line, coach, whatever it may be. But Bryce Young on his own was labeled as being a very pro-ready quarterback in the 2023 draft. And that was just not really the case when we saw him actually on the field. Despite the outside circumstances of guys not getting open or linemen, whatever, when Bryce Young did have a clean pocket, or when he did have someone create separation, he missed them a lot of the time on deep passes, especially. The deep ball was not really there this past year for Bryce Young, and I think he does have a good arm. I don't think that's really the issue. I think it's the accuracy. I think that could have come from poor footwork and coaching, all that kind of stuff. But all that aside, Bryce Young on his own, regardless of the outside circumstances, was not as good as he was supposed to be. There was times where he would get pressured so quickly he had to throw the ball away, which would kind of just make the offense, it's a waste of a down. So, a lot of times it was run up the middle, screen, punt the ball, or run up the middle, third deep, incomplete, punt the ball. That's what it was a lot of the time. And I think poor coaching was a huge issue last year. And I like Dave Canales and where the Panthers stand this year, but still talking about last year, let's get into the offensive line. Bryce Young was pressured 150 times last year, which is unreal. And people like to point out like his size. He's not the biggest guy in the world, which I think is a lazy argument to just say, oh, he's bad because he's small. Like, that's not really true. There's a lot of other reasons as to why he's bad. And I think he was like 30th in the NFL with batted down passes. So that really in itself is not the issue. Whenever he has, two defensive tackles running at him, and then he's also undersized, yeah, then the hype probably comes into play. But I do think just saying, oh, he's not doing well because he's undersized, it's just really not that true. Bryce Young is a similar size to Drew Brees, and he had a great career, so it can be done. I don't think the height in itself is, inherently why he's playing so poorly, or at least played so poorly. I think the offensive line was a huge issue. Constant pressures, constant hit as he was throwing the ball, constantly getting sacked. And despite all the jokes about his size and his small frame, he only missed one game after getting sacked like 62 times last year. So for what it's worth, he is at least durable. Now for passing specifically, he threw for 2,877 yards, 11 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions. Very, very bad. I already kind of touched on the offensive line and, very little time to throw the ball. But let's also talk about some of those receivers. That was a very, very poor receiving room. And going back to last offseason, I had kind of said I was very optimistic as a fan, but I did feel like the weapons were kind of mid. I mean, you had Adam Thielen going to last year, you had Hayden Hurst, and, you had Mingo as a rookie, DJ Chark. It was guys that I felt were going to be competent enough to at least give Bryce Young a chance, but not much more than that. And honestly, they didn't really get much of a chance anyway. Adam Thielen had a great season. He was pretty much the only guy you could count on to somewhat consistently separate. DJ Chark was good every once in a while, but not very much. Jonathan Mingo struggled a whole lot. Mingo was not very good. But again, he also had to kind of deal with the issues of poor coaching and play calling and offensive line not giving Bryce enough time to let the play develop. So it all kind of plays into each other, but receivers not very good. And again, despite that, that's not what you want from the first overall pick. That's not what you were expecting to get from a guy labeled as the most pro-ready quarterback in the entire NFL draft in 2023. It's a underwhelming and disappointing season. Rushing wise, I felt Bryce Young was a little underrated as a rusher. He had 39 carries for 253 yards, no touchdowns. He did have a 2-point conversion at some point in the year. And it was nice to see him extend plays, even though no one got open a lot of times. He was able to at least give guys a chance, even if it didn't amount to anything. And on his own, he was able to try to escape pressure and get key first downs at some point when the offense wasn't doing anything. So I do give him a lot of credit there because I think that wasn't talked about enough. Sometimes those drives that should have stalled out, and a lot of times did stall out, were prolonged because being able to get away from pressure and running 8, 7 yards, 7, 8 yards, whatever it was for a first down. So I do think I want to highlight that though. That is, I think, a underrated part of his game. Now, a big part of this video that I wanted to talk about is since Bryce Young was drafted, you had Frank Wright there, you had Scott Fitterer as the GM. That is all out the window. Both those guys have been fired. You now have Dave Canales as head coach, the offensive coordinator from the Buccaneers coming over. And I think this is a huge year for Bryce Young because if you look at it this way, Bryce Young is a somewhat undersized quarterback prospect who played very poorly and was drafted by, a different front office, a different head coach, basically. The new guys that are in there now, Bryce Young isn't exactly their guy. Obviously, they want him to be because it would save them a lot of trouble. But it's not like they took the time to scout him and look through it. Dan Morgan, the GM, you could say technically did. He was the assistant GM and then got promoted. But that also doesn't mean that Morgan would have preferred a different quarterback in the 2020 NFL draft anyway. So I still feel like it's worth noting that Bryce Young is in a spot now where he has to really prove it this year. Because let's say that this season he comes out very underwhelming. Panthers get like 4 or 5 wins. He's not very good. The Panthers are in a very tough spot because going into next year, into the following season, with a new head coach in there, if he feels like Bryce Young is not the guy, you have a decision to make, whether it's sign a veteran, draft a rookie for competition. But then the issue there is that next season's quarterback class is not near as good as this one. You have Carson Beck from Georgia. You have Jalen Milroe from Alabama. Shedeur Sanders from Colorado. You don't really have, Quinn Ewers from Texas. You don't have the Cale Williams, the Jaden Daniels, the Drake May. Like, it's not that kind of class. So do you take a guy at quarterback and the likely top 10 will you have a pick then next season to compete with Bryce Young? That's a pretty, risky choice. I don't know. It puts the Panthers in a very bad situation. It also puts Bryce Young in a very tough situation because we just kind of saw this happen with Zach Wilson on the Jets, where, it became very evident he was holding this team back. Now, one thing I want to say, though, I wouldn't say Bryce Young is holding this team back. I would say he's just right in there with the rest of the dumpster fire because that entire offense is bad, basically, except maybe Chuba Hubbard, I guess. So he has to distance himself from the rest of the garbage around him, if that makes sense. If Bryce Young is good this year, which I think he will be better, if he is good this year, the Panthers will likely not get a lot of wins either way. They will probably still have a top 10 pick, whether Bryce Young is good or bad. So if Bryce Young is good this year and you have a top 10 pick, that changes the direction of the team a whole lot because instead of looking at quarterback potentially, you can then look at other offensive positions to help surround Bryce Young and build around him if you know that he actually can be the guy. So for Bryce Young's own sake, this is a huge season for him to prove he can at least be a starter in the NFL. Even if the Panthers decide to move on from him after this season, or at least bring someone in to kind of have a quarterback competition, he has to prove that he can be the guy. If this season he comes out and plays the exact same and has another we'll say 13, 14 touchdowns to 12 interception season, he's going to have competition next season, no doubt about it. And for him individually, then you got to think, is he going to want out and want a new shot at a different team with different coaching, a fresh start? I don't know. But this season is going to decide whether Bryce Young can be the guy or if they're going to decide to put someone in there to see if someone else can be the guy and beat Bryce Young for a quarterback job. And I know it might sound like I'm kind of jumping ahead some, but we really did just see this kind of unravel with Zach Wilson on the Jets, where they gave him plenty of opportunities. The goal was for Rodgers to kind of mentor him as Rodgers the starter. Obviously, Rodgers gets hurt. Not really what ended up happening, unfortunately. But Wilson had plenty of chances, and he continued to just disappoint. And at a certain point, regardless of how high of a pick they are, you have to just cut your losses. And I think this season is going to show whether the Panthers have this mindset of, okay, he's the guy, let's build around him, or, okay, we messed up, it's time to kind of backtrack a little bit here. So for this season, though, this is the offense Bryce Young has to work with. He has Chuba Hubbard, Deontay Johnson, Adam Thielen, Jonathan Mingo, Tommy Tremble, Ike Ekwonu, Damian Lewis, Austin Corbett, Robert Hunt, and Taylor Moton. This is an improved offense from last year, by far. Last year, very, very bad. You made a point of getting Robert Hunt and Damian Lewis for the O-line because that was a huge weakness last season. You draft Jonathan Brooks and Xavier Legette and Jatavion Sanders, so 3 guys at skill positions that can really help Bryce Young. I think the Deontay Johnson trade was huge. You traded Dante Jackson, the corner, for the wide receiver Dante Johnson from the Steelers, and they weren't going to re-sign Dante Jackson anyway, so you didn't really need him. You got a free potential wide receiver one, basically. So that was a great move. This is an offense that I feel like can actually give Bryce Young a real shot. And that's why I think this year is so big, because now you can't say they didn't really try and surround him with something else. You drafted young talent. You brought in veterans for offensive line. You still have the veteran Thielen there, wide receiver. Bryce Young has the guys, and I'm not gonna say it's a top wide receiver room in the NFL, but it's, you have guys competent enough to give him a real shot. And so now if he disappoints, I think you look potentially at someone else to at least bring in for a competition after this season. I think the 2024 NFL season will strongly decide whether Bryce Young is a long-term starter in the NFL, or whether he's, starting to get put in the hot seat and really have to either look at a different team or one out, or at least beat somebody else to earn the quarterback job going forward. I think it's a huge year for that. I think the Panthers have done a good job at least surrounding Bryce Young with guys that can potentially help him prove how good he can be. And that's why I think that if it doesn't happen now, you're getting closer to hitting that panic button if you're the Panthers front office. And again, I do think Bryce Young can be that guy. I think he can be the starter for Carolina. Dave Canales has proved to help guys like Geno Smith in Seattle when he was the offensive coordinator there. He goes to Tampa Bay. He helps Baker Mayfield a ton. He has proven to help quarterbacks. Bryce Young's footwork looks a lot better than it did last year already. But what's mind-boggling to me, and I just have to say this, is why is he not playing preseason? I don't understand that. You rest basically all starters, week one for preseason. But then you look at other teams and you see Patrick Mahomes playing, and Josh Allen playing, and Joe Burrow playing. If it's good enough for them, why is it not good enough for a guy that's coming off a very underwhelming rookie season? I mean, would it not make more sense to give this young guy some reps with people he might not be familiar with, like Deontay Johnson and like Xavier Legette? I think it makes more sense to give him game-like reps, develop that chemistry. I mean, I'm not sure. I hope Bryce Young is still confident in himself, but to be honest, there's no way he's as confident as he would have been going into last season after the way things went last year. I think giving him some meaningful preseason reps and being able to develop confidence and chemistry could go a long way. And I honestly don't like the decision at all to rest week one preseason. There's still 2 weeks left in preseason. I would hope they play in preseason week 2. If he does not play in preseason week 2, though, I would be honestly kind of dumbfounded as to what the reasoning would be there. So that's one thing I want to say. I have been a fan of Dave Canales before Carolina. I've loved what he's done since he first got here. But this decision, I think, is just kind of, it's not helping anybody. I hope he plays preseason week 2. I hope Bryce Young can be the guy. I think he can be. But I do feel like this season will strongly decide that. So if you guys enjoyed the video, be sure to subscribe down below. It is free. I would really appreciate that. Getting really close to 700 subscribers. But yeah, leave a like. Let me know down below if you think Bryce Young can be the guy or not. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.